All righty. Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy podcast. My name is Tom Scarda, and we are out here in this podcast helping people figure out franchising. The Franchise Academy helps people figure out if franchising is for them or not. I'm a franchise consultant and an advisor. I match people with opportunities based on skills, personality, goals, kind of like the eHarmony of business is what I like to call it. Today, I have a friend and a mentor, Ron Holt, with me. Ron founded a franchise called Two Maids and a Mop out of Birmingham, Alabama. He is growing this thing nationally. I first saw Ron on the cover, I believe it was the cover of Inc. magazine or one of those magazines. He gets so much press because he's doing such a great job, turning this little interesting franchise and the industry on its ear and doing some really creative things. So I want to bring in Ron. Good morning, Ron. How are you?
I'm doing great, Tom. Thanks for inviting me here. It's an honor to be here, to be honest. I'm excited to talk with you.
It's an honor to have you. This is really an unbelievable thing. So you've been working with our company Franchoice for quite a few years now. We've been placing people like crazy in this business. And it's such a simple model. So how did you come up with Two Maids and a Mop? What's the premise here?
Well, there's little romance to this and a whole lot of science to it. So it's not one of those really tearjerker stories, but I'll kind of have to go back in time and talk a little bit about my prior history before ever even becoming an entrepreneur. And that journey will lead you into why I started Two Maids and a Mop in the first place.
Please.
So I'm a chemist by trade. I was working inside this laboratory and I couldn't stand it. I hated it, and it was not quite the white collar when people think of white collar in America, but it was a white collar because it was a lab coat. And, I was doing well. I was able to communicate pretty well. And so I rose through the ranks pretty quickly. And within a couple of years, right out of college, became the manager of this laboratory. And, underneath me were PhDs with chemical engineering degrees and other chemists and biologists and super smart, intelligent people. And here I am, this 24-year-old idiot, managing these people and running this business for a global corporation.
Wow.
And it didn't take me long to figure out that one of the key reasons for its success was this thing called recurring revenue. I fell in love with it, and it's just this phenomenon. As someone that had never been to business school before, it was this foreign language. But probably one of my best secrets that I didn't really look at as a secret back in those days was the fact that I didn't have any preconceived notion of what business was supposed to be. So recurring revenue, again, was this foreign language, and I saw it up close and personal. I saw how much money was being made from it. I saw how few clients were being served and how those clients didn't have to be remarketed to, didn't have to be resold. We didn't spend money on them. They spent money on us, actually, because they would send in these specimens for testing every day. And within about a week or two, I figured out whatever my life's going to look like down the road, it's got to have some form of recurring revenue in it. I didn't really know I was going to be an entrepreneur at that time, but it was sort of the seeds to the next sort of steps, per se.
Sure.
Once I fell in love with recurring revenue, I fell out of love with corporate America. And I said to myself, I've got millions of ideas. All these middle managers above me were saying, no, no, no. I tell this story. It's a true story. It's a crazy story. Probably a lot of people can relate to it. At some point, I took my boss's job. And prior to taking my boss's job for about a year, I had written this weekly report on everything from what we did the previous week, key decisions I made, actions that need to happen the following week. And it was really extensive report, and I would hand it off to my boss. And I did part of it was because I wanted to know what was going on in the business myself, but mostly I was trying to impress the guy. And long story short, about a year later, I took his job. He retired, and I took his office. And when I took his office, I opened the drawer, and 52 reports fell out. He had never read one of those things. So it was just sort of the tipping point for me to say, you know what, this is not me. I'm making a bunch of money. I'm young, and I should be happy, but I'm totally unhappy. And I told myself that right then and there, I'm going to start a business so that this doesn't happen to me ever again.
Yeah.
And so those are sort of the early seeds to wanting to start a business. And what eventually happened was I decided, once I made that decision to become an entrepreneur, I made this crazy goal of $150,000, which to a lot of people may not sound like a whole lot of money. But to me, as a 24-year-old kid, it was sounded like $150 million. I had about 1,000 in the bank. So,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, been there.
yeah. And so over the course of the next 7 years, believe it or not, I inched my way day after day, week after week to that $150,000 mark. And along the way, I didn't really think of my journey in terms of growing up. I just thought I was working to earn my way to 150 so I could start a business. I also grew up. I became a better manager. I became more mature. I learned from some of my mistakes. Sometimes my supervisor said no for a reason because the ideas were bad. And after 7 years, I finally got to the $150,000 mark. And along the way, came up with three things that led me directly to two maids and a mop in the residential cleaning industry. Of course, first was recurring revenue. The second, I really never wanted to. I'm sort of a contrarian by nature. I like to do things a little bit differently. And the lab itself was somewhat different. There were only three providers of this type of testing in North America. And so it was very few people could do this. And so I wanted to be in an industry that no one else wanted to be in because I felt like I'd be able to rise above the tide quicker. I wouldn't be chased by Wall Street or Silicon Valley. It'd just be me sort of doing my thing. What I discovered was that in residential cleaning at that time, and believe it or not, even at this time, more than 90% of the market was served by mom and pop operators. And so the second thing was I just wanted to be in a little bit different of an industry. And the third, I wanted to be in a service industry that really had not yet embraced innovation or technology. And so back in those days, the word disruption wasn't cool like it is now, but I sensed that residential cleaning, since it was served 9 out of 10 times by a mom and pop operator, really had not embraced the idea or role of technology. And I didn't know if I was going to create robots or what, but I felt like I'd be able to get inside the industry, find those weaknesses and turn those into strengths, again, using technology. And those three things, believe it or not, led me straight into the headwinds of the residential cleaning industry. And I went headfirst without even thinking about the one thing I probably should have thought about: how do you clean a house? I figured that out after the fact.
Well, that's great. So when you say recurring revenue, what does that mean in a two maids model?
Yeah, so most of our clients in a given store, a significant percentage of our customer base is comprised of recurring clients, which utilize our service weekly, every other week, or once every month, once every 4 weeks. The most common is every 2 weeks. So we get when we sign up a new biweekly client, per se, let's say it's $100, that's actually a $2,600 annual value. We're going to clean that person's home 26 times. So we're signing up 26 clients. Or if it's a weekly client, we're signing up 52 clients. No one really thinks of it that way, but that's what recurring revenue is. It's as close to compound interest as you can get in the service industry.
Yeah, I love that. What technology have you employed in this residential cleaning business, which is such a basic business, right?
Right. Well, again, early on, I had Rosie the Robot visions. I had all these dreams of creating some kind of machinery that would revolutionize the industry. And what I discovered is that residential cleaning specifically is very hands-on. It's very difficult for a robot to come in and totally take over our business model. Think about your own house. Think about your bathroom counter. It's probably got a lot of stuff on it, if you're like most bathroom counter owners. And I don't know about you, but a lot of bosses of the house, the wives, in other words, tend to want things to look exactly the same except clean after we leave. And so we have to pick everything up, clean underneath it, clean the item, put it right back where it was, and then move on. And if it's out of place, we're in trouble. A robot has a hard time with that, and plus there's breakage and all sorts of opportunities. So we didn't really go down that road in terms of technology. We looked at it from a service basis, so everything from logistical nightmares early on, we were using pen and paper. I literally went out and I bought two things. I bought an Office Depot calendar, one of those map desk calendars, if you know what I'm referring to. And I bought one of those old school maps, that you had to, spread across the table to review. And that was my logistics tool. And, we had tons of inefficiency because of that. We were way too long on the road, too many people riding the clock because they claimed to be lost or whatever. And so the first thing we did is we said, let's go test some software that can make life easier for us. What we discovered is software that's serving our industry was very crude at the time. And I said to myself that there's a way that we can make that better. And it took a while, but eventually, as we grew, we were able to bring that software development in-house and actually create our own piece of software that our franchisees and our customers utilize today. And it's everything from a logistical tool that's much better than a map on a desk to a part CRM, has merchant processing inside of it. It's got a pricing component to it as well. And it also allows our customers to book directly for this afternoon if they want it, So
Right.
it in our world, it's we kind of call ourselves sort of the Google or the residential cleaning industry. We're not Google, we're not in Silicon Valley. We're square in the southeastern part of the U.S., and so we don't want to compare ourselves directly with a Google or Facebook, but we do have a really strong software development team in house, and we're proud of those guys. And they've built a heck of a software that really, really helps make our franchisees' lives better. And that's for me what I always wanted. Is I didn't necessarily know how we could use machinery to make our customers' lives better, but I felt like we can make the business owner's life easier. And that's really how we've decided to use technology to improve the business model.
Do you have like an app where the customer rates the cleaning job or something like that?
We do. Yeah. So that's actually our secret sauce. That's what makes us completely different. It's what we call our purple cow. For any of you Seth Godin fans out there that's read the book Purple Cow,
Yes.
That's our purple cow. And it actually came from that book. So we call it the pay for performance plan.
Wow.
And in the early days, we didn't have software. We had an abacus, and we needed really strong calculus skills to pull it off. But basically, every time someone cleans a home, every time we send two people to clean a house, the customer rates their level of satisfaction on a really simple scale of 1 to 10. And that number will directly determine the compensation level for the two people who clean the house. And
Wow.
it is a powerful message that we send to customers, and it's different. It is a purple cow in our opinion. It's very unique in our industry. And in the early days, it was very difficult to pull off because it was a ton of record keeping, a lot of handwritten manual math. The good news is today, the main piece of work is just the data entry of it. Some of the customers rate directly, literally from an app, like you asked. They will slide a scale from 1 to 10, and we'll get a number from that. In other cases, we talk directly with the customer. We have to enter the data, but the math's all behind the scenes at this point. No more abacuses.
I love that. That is so great. So when you think back about this journey, and it's a relatively short journey from starting this business to getting to the franchising, what is one like major blunder that you made that you learned a lesson from that you could share?
Oh gosh, one. And there's so many. I'll tell you. So the biggest blunder for me, this is going to sound too easy of an answer, but it's the truth. And so it's going to sound easy, but just bear with me. So for 7 years, we opened corporate stores. We had 12 corporate stores before we ever franchised, and we were doing well. We were growing. Top line revenue was strong. We had a few weaknesses here and there. The problem was we had outgrown our infrastructure, and so we had to make a real decision. How do we leverage tomorrow? How do we keep chasing our dream to become a national brand? And it was going to be hard because we were very much cash flow driven at the time. There were no banks just dying to hand us over money because our biggest asset was a vacuum cleaner.
Right.
So we had to wait till we made money in a new store before we could open the 13th store or 14th store. And I've always had this overarching just dream to build a national cleaning brand that's like none other. And so I knew that meant more stores, and opening corporate stores just wasn't doing it for me fast enough. And we were having some just real issues because we were hiring people in other towns and then going back to Birmingham, Alabama and saying, do your job, and in return, we'll pay you, an employee. And that employee-employer relationship sometimes thrived, sometimes failed. Mm-hmm. Franchising surfaced about that time. And I was I was scared to death of it because I thought all these franchisees are going to hate us. It's going to be a us versus them mentality, and I want our success to be shared and happy and positive. And so I was scared to death of it until one day in a Las Vegas hotel lobby, I met a franchisor randomly. We were headed back to the hotel or to the airport. And on that ride back, this franchisor who was in a consumer service field told me all the great things about franchising. And my eyes were wide open all of a sudden to that. And I went back home, and over the course of the next several months, fell in love with franchising, totally pivoted and changed the business model to focus on franchising as our new mode of growth. And looking back on it, the biggest mistake I can ever really admit to was the fact that I was so blind to how powerful franchising can be. It's not an employee-employer relationship. It's absolutely a business partnership, and we have shared mutual interest. We want the franchisee to make money because that means we make money as well. So we both want success from one another. And it's also allowed us to partner with superstars that teach us new things.
Yes.
In the old days, I was the smartest guy in the room. Today, we have 88 franchises open for business today, and we have 88 really, really smart people that, for the most part, are smarter than I am. And so we receive ideas from them that we test, and then at some point we process and we implement within the network. We would have never had that opportunity when we were opening our corporate stores.
That's great. And I think you just broke a myth about franchising, where people often think that you buy a franchise and they're going to tell you, when to do this and when to do that, rules, regulations, and it's like paramilitary. And it's not at all. Even if you go back and watch the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton about McDonald's and those guys, and there's so many different stories, but these franchises grow from the innovation of their franchisees, and all these franchisees bring in, you'll have somebody who was an airline pilot, and you could probably rattle off a bunch of industries where other people came from, and now they are helping you to grow as a brand. And we were talking about this yesterday with one of your franchisees in Florida, that when the tide rises, all the boats float, and that's the beautiful thing about franchising. So
yeah. I'll tell you a really good example. It's a practical, real life example. So one of our first franchise stores was in Fort Worth, Texas, and this guy's still a great franchisee. He's built an amazing business. And early on, we had this third-party piece of software that helped automate the hiring process. And it was a really good piece of software that we were happy with. We used it forever in our corporate operations. And we knew the people really well at the corporate levels who had a great relationship with the vendor. And here's Fort Worth, Texas saying, I got something that's cheaper and better. In real life, cheaper and better doesn't normally exist, right? And so we were skeptical, but we said, you know what? We're new at this. We're naive enough to give this a shot. And so we gave it a shot. We tested it at the corporate level. And sure enough, it was pretty clear it was cheaper and better. And so we tested it with a larger test group. At the time, we had 4 franchisees. So we tested it with 50% of the network. And it was cheaper and better. And we still use that software today. And it has saved our franchisees literally thousands of dollars over the years. And that idea came from a franchisee in Fort Worth, Texas. We would have never experienced that with corporate growth.
Love that story. Love that. So Ron, what are you excited about right now in business?
Well, it's the same thing I've been excited about forever, So there's 2 things I kind of will talk about. So my dream has always been, literally from day one, to build the largest, fastest growing, most innovative residential cleaning service in America. Those words may sound like just words to most people, but to me, it's my life's mantra. It means more than just words on a piece of paper to me. It means everything. It's my scoreboard. And so until we can reach that goal, that dream, I'm not done. I'm going to keep fighting, keep hustling. And that's what keeps me going. It's what keeps me showing up every day here with a smile. So that's what I'm most excited about, is just keep on fighting. The second is I've sort of had this renewed enthusiasm for the business model. The demand for our industry has always been strong, but it's stronger now than I've ever seen it. It is. In the old days, people who hired us because this was a luxury style purchase. They were proud of it. They would brag about it. And, it was only for the who's who of every community.
Right.
Today, most of our customers are middle America dual income households, 2 or 3 kids, no time on their schedule because they're working, going to the soccer games, and just busy. And the last thing they want to do is clean on Saturday morning or whatever. And so here we are standing there ready to take their business. And in the old days, no one would have ever paid us the rates they're paying us today. And so the prosperity of America is as strong as it's ever been in terms of the economy. And that's a huge part of the reason for the demand. But I also believe that there's been this sort of shift in buying mentality where the suburban household thinks it's okay. It's not a luxury. It's actually a necessity to hire people like us. And that's been a huge deal for us in terms of benefit. And we're working our tail off to figure out a way to get in front of that and really be a true purple cow within the residential cleaning industry.
Yeah, and you guys are doing a fabulous job. Can't wait to get a couple of franchisees here in Long Island, where I live, because it's needed, and you could kill it here for sure.
Right. Yep. I agree. Yeah. You'll be our first customer, right?
And we will be, and because we have a mom and pop outfit that's doing it now, and they are doing a really bad job. Matter of fact, last week after they left, I told my wife I want to fire them. They're just not doing it.
Right.
And the amount of things that have been broken in the past year by these folks is just ridiculous. It's just,
here, I think this is sort of the secret to any industry. Forget residential cleaning. You just talked about it. When you think about the relationship you have, let's say with your wife, with my wife, if you were to break something today in your house, your wife probably wouldn't divorce you, right? Probably.
well, maybe, yeah.
Because you have a relationship. You guys, obviously married, you're loving one another, you have a history, and you can overcome mistakes because of that bond you have. That's what we want Two Maids and a Mop to be to our customers. We're going to make mistakes. We may break things too. We're not going to be perfect. We're actually going to be imperfect, but we want to create a relationship, a bond, a strong bond with every one of our clients so that when those mistakes happen, the customer can say, you know what, that wasn't good, but I'm going to overlook it because look at all the other great things these guys do for me. Yeah. That's really our goal with every one of our clients that we sign on an everyday basis.
Great philosophy. I really love that. So Ron, is there a book or a mentor that you could mention that has helped you along your journey?
This is going to sound too easy as well. Everybody's favorite investor is Warren Buffett, right? And so I'm from Southwest Georgia, which is probably very foreign to you, but it's just, trust me, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's super Southern, very rural, and very poor, to be honest with you. And I somehow along the way never met the guy, but ran into this book about Warren Buffett. And, he's Midwestern, he's from Nebraska, and he talked like people from South Georgia do. Yeah. Super conservative, very frugal, yet he's a multi-billionaire, and at the time was the richest man on earth. And I fell in love with everything Warren Buffett, and I've been fortunate to, be, sharing in his story, 2 really cool stories just from the last 12 months. Somehow, some way, CNBC discovered my infatuation for Warren Buffett. I've always felt that Warren Buffett was sort of like a second father to me. And I always feel like the guy's watching me, even though I've never met him one time. And so everything I do, every decision I make, I go, what would Warren do? And, so somehow CNBC discovered this, and they did this big expose on myself and Two Maids and a Mop, the business, and featured some of our franchisees, came to our national conference, went out to some of our stores, and they aired it the night before the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting that happens every May in Omaha. On top of that, this is even a cooler deal. The last 2 years of that shareholder conference, before Warren Buffett speaks, they air the Two Maids and a Mop CNBC piece, and Warren Buffett watches it. So to me, that's the biggest thing in the world. It's the coolest thing ever.
That's a great story, and it's kind of like putting it out in the universe, and amazing things happen.
Right.
Such a great story.
Yeah, thank you.
Man, you got to get to the Berkshire Hathaway.
I used to go every year, but then kiddos showed up, and then there's baseball games and dance recitals and all that on the weekend.
So the kids are important, obviously.
Right.
And
Right.
and talking about that, that's what makes this such a great franchise for husband and wife teams, because you're doing residential cleaning, during the day,
Right.
right? And
It's
so it's family friendly franchise. Do you agree with that?
absolutely, yeah. It's Monday through Friday. There's no weekends. It's 8 to 5 essentially. Nobody wants you in their home 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night cleaning their house. So we're out by 4:30, 5 o'clock at the latest. You know, for us, part of this was a selfish decision. I am again from the Southeast. We are obsessed with our college football. And so the very first Saturday that I opened, this is a true story. The very first Saturday that I opened the business, we were originally based in Florida. And so I had this idea to clean these vacation rentals on the beach on Saturday, because that's the turnover day for everybody coming in and leaving town.
Right.
And so I did it. I had these, big tickets, and I'm like, yes, I'm making money. And about that time, I realized I'm missing football. And so I got to do something. I got to change this. I said, I got to figure out a way to get back to my football. This is pre-kids. And that was one of the early motivations to change to a Monday through Friday residential focus so I could watch football.
Yeah, right. Because like I would consider that commercial cleaning what you were doing.
Right.
Commercial cleaning is off hours. You're cleaning the restaurant and the doctor's office after hours.
Right.
So I get that. That makes a lot of sense. So what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, there's so I could go on and on with so many, really good topics. Some people I've met face to face that have given me some great, some like Warren Buffett I've never met. But to me, the one I have to talk about, and you're gonna probably relate to this, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to meet the founder of Subway in the past, and
Fred DeLuca, sure.
He passed away a few years ago. But I was fortunate to meet Fred DeLuca at a conference many years ago. I had stepped out to check email, and I sat at this table, and it was just me and him. And I didn't know who he was at the time. And I was checking email, and he started to make small talk. It's just the two of us sitting there. And, I answered some questions. I was pretty full of myself because we had 14 or 15 stores, and I thought I was, a big deal. And I was just being nice and cordial. And I said, "So what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I started this little company called Subway, and we have 42,000 franchise units now." And my eyes went, pretty big. And you know what? For the next hour, Fred DeLuca gave me a whole tutorial on franchising. And, the best thing he told me and we went on to become friends, fast friends, really, after that. And again, he passed away a few years ago. But before that, and just before he became ill, we were talking on a regular basis. And the one thing that sticks with me that I'll never forget is he told me that early on, the very first Subway, the very first few Subways that they opened in Connecticut, the stores, the sandwich was good, the process was great, but the profits were what sold the business model. Just staggering, unheard of profit margins that nobody had ever seen in the food service industry before. And over time, he said that franchisees said, "Let's do this, let's do that, let's do this, let's automate that, let's systemize this, let's process that." And everything was meant to make the franchisee's life better. And it did. The business model in 2018 or 16 at the time was completely different than it was 30 years ago when he first started. And the franchisee had to almost do nothing. But the profit margins were in the very low single digits also many years later, whereas they were in the double digits and then some when he first started. So he told me, this is going to sound counterproductive, to listen to your franchisees, but always work to respect the bottom line of the business model, because a franchisee is going to really want to make their life easier, and you're going to want to make their life easier too. But if that comes at the expense of profit, work hard to fight against that. And so I have sort of taken that mantra and looked at it as sort of one of my biggest purposes as the CEO of Two Maids and a Mop, is to protect the bottom line for every single franchisee, because one of the biggest reasons, if not the only reason, people enter into business ownership is to make money. And so, that's if Fred DeLuca thinks that's the way you should build a franchise model, it was good enough for me.
Wow, that is really an amazing story, and that's what I love about the International Franchise Association. I think that's probably the meeting you met Fred at.
Absolutely, yeah.
And actually, my mentor Jeff Elgin shares a similar story where he was outside sitting on a bench, sitting next to this guy he didn't know, and it was Fred. and he tells us a similar
Is that
story.
right?
Yeah, yeah, you should ask him about it next time you see Jeff.
Yeah.
Pretty funny stuff. Um, so Ron, to wrap it up, this has been absolutely wonderful. We should do this again. You got so much wisdom and knowledge, not only for franchisees but for franchisors, and people turning their business into a franchise. You got so
Absolutely.
much. What's one myth that you would like to bust right here, right now about franchising? Um,
Well, to me, I believe that the best franchisees also are very hungry entrepreneurs. And I know that in the franchise industry, that's not necessarily what people want to categorize franchisees with. And while they're not Steve Jobs, who wants to go live on an island and risk everything every day, at the same time, in our world, in our network, you talked to one yesterday. Our best franchisees are absolutely strong entrepreneurs. And so we get great ideas from them, and we listen to them, and they hustle, man. They follow our rules, they follow our systems, they follow our process. But at the same time, they wake up every day with a passion and drive that is pretty dang strong. And so to me, that's the biggest myth, is that a great franchisee can also be a great entrepreneur.
yeah. That is great, and that's also right. Another fallacy where you're not an entrepreneur, because I do say that. I'm guilty of that. You're a business owner, but you're not really an entrepreneur. But I mean, in my own franchises that I owned, I actually did entrepreneurial stuff and helped the franchise do new things. So I had my own ideas that I was bringing to the table from my end of the world. So great stuff.
I'll tell you. So our best franchisees give me hell. They give me hell. They call me and they push me and they challenge me and they test me and they say, let's try this, let's try that. And I say no a lot, but those guys are awesome. And I love every one of those guys that do that, because it really pushes me to make sure that our model is strong, is profitable, and scalable. And so, as much as we love franchisees, those same franchisees no one's going outside of our systems. No one's just saying, you know what, I got a better way to skin the cat here. I'm going to do it differently today because I'm an entrepreneur. And so, when I say they're a great entrepreneur, it doesn't mean they're out there just being cowboys and doing whatever they want. They're still very much following our model, but they're also pushing us to really reinvent the business model as often as we can.
Yeah, right. You're all in it together, and so the it's a mutual respect thing. That's kind of what I'm hearing is
Absolutely.
between you and the franchisees. It's respect, and that goes a long way. And there's also trust, as you mentioned. That's a big takeaway for me. Is when you have that trust, like in a marriage, you could do wonderful things. And when there is a mistake, the whole house doesn't fall apart. So
Right.
this
Don't
is
break
great.
something today, though. So don't test that theory.
Not every day, but every once in a while, you never know.
Yeah.
It does happen, and it's out of your control usually when it does.
Yeah.
So this is
Well,
great. How can people get in touch with you to pick your brain if they wanted to?
yeah, there's a couple ways. Twomaidsfranchise.com, just like it sounds, TWO, twomaidsfranchise.com is the easiest way to go and learn more about the franchise opportunity, what the investment looks like. You'll be able to hear from some of our franchisees as well. Honestly, I love talk and shop with as many people as possible about franchising, residential cleaning, entrepreneurship. So if someone wants to find me on LinkedIn, I'm easy to find. I'm a 2-syllable guy, Ron Holt. So search for Ron Holt and you'll find me.
Yeah, there you go. And so all that information will be on the franchiseacademy.com as well. So if you're listening on Apple or Pandora or Spotify, go to the franchiseacademy.com and you will find all of Ron's information and Two Maids in a Mop info. Ron, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Oh, Tom, I love it. Let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. God bless you. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet. Thank you.
All right.